Hi there. It's good to be with you in Malmo, even if only in two dimensions. I'm going to talk a little bit about imagination and where imagination might be going. I've spent much of my life working on the practicalities of social innovation and policy, business models, implementation issues, budgets, buildings, people, all of those sort of things. But I've become increasingly concerned about linking that sort of present activity with our views a generation or two into the future. And I think we have a problem of imagination at the moment. You can see that very clearly if you ask people what they think may lie ahead. They find it quite easy to picture ecological disaster, climate catastrophe, and they often find it quite easy to picture how technologies might evolve with smart robots and implants and so on. But they find it much harder to imagine how our society could be dramatically better in 20, 40, 60 years' time. What could happen to our welfare state, our democracy, our neighborhoods, our cities? So I've been looking at what we can learn partly from the past of imagination, from all the extraordinary work over many centuries of utopias. There are feminist utopias going back to the 15th century, the 16th century. The 19th century had extraordinary utopias about the end of private property, or imagining credit cards, or imagining a complete transformation of democracy. I've also been looking at places which try to prefigure the future, model towns, model cities, and also at the role of nations, like the country where my family comes from, New Zealand, the first to give everyone the vote, one of the pioneers of the welfare state, and more recently, pioneering integrating happiness into government budgets or giving legal personhood to rivers and parts of nature. And all of these, I think, give us inspiration about how maybe we could be doing better at thinking into the future. And I think it helps us to go through exploration of, as it were, what ifs. Some of the what ifs are kind of obvious. What if we really accelerated the move to net zero economy, society, and so on? What would that mean for jobs, for data, for governance, all of these sort of things? We're just beginning to come to grips with. What if we really transformed our democracy? What if we were inventing it now, not in the late 19th century, with parliaments and parties and 4 or 5 yearly elections? What if we transformed social media so truth became something you had a legal obligation to, not something which was completely optional? What if capital was reshaped so really ecological and social impacts were embedded in all the reporting requirements around companies and investment and pensions and insurance? What if we started thinking really hard now about what is likely in our near future, which is that with life expectancy going up and working time going down, we'll have billions of hours released, liberated perhaps for the social economy or for creativity of all kinds? What if we transformed our global arrangements? We have the IPCC on climate change, IPBES on biodiversity. What if we created a new generation of global platforms, really harnessing global collective intelligence around the things which really matter? There are many, many other questions of this kind where we need radical imagination about what could be possible in a generation or two's time, and then linking that to the practical work now to start preparing our way forward. Now, one of the reasons I got interested in this space was an observation that the institutions which perhaps in the past helped us do this kind of social imagination have largely vacated this space. It used to be a space for political parties, but very few of them have even the capacity to think far ahead. It used to be a space that universities did a lot of work in, but for different reasons, they've turned inwards. And I've been trying to look at what could be done in these different places to change that. Just this month, the New Institute in Hamburg has published a paper I've written specifically on what universities could be doing with what I call exploratory social science, bringing together deep subject expertise with imagination and creativity to start mapping out some of these transition routes to the future. I've been looking at the role of the arts. How can the arts expand our imagination, help us think in novel ways? And I've got a book coming out early next year from Cambridge University Press, specifically on what the arts can do, but also what they can't do in help us think ahead to a zero carbon world or a world full of ubiquitous artificial intelligences. And I've tried to look at what could be done in a city or a nation to bring in the public into a really an inclusive conversation about what we want to see in the future, what we don't want to see. How do we start reshaping our care for the elderly, our childcare, our primary education, our management of parks or libraries to be ready for a better future up ahead? I think this is really important work. It's quite difficult work, and I don't have any magic solutions. But at the moment, we're in this weird position where most of the public in most rich countries expect the world to be worse off for their children than for them. Sweden, I think it's about 50 to 30% majority think that their children will be worse off than them. We're suffering from a pervasive almost fatalism and pessimism about the world, which has some good reasons because we're seeing what's happening to the climate and inadequate action. But in some ways, we've overshot. And this pessimism can be reinforcing. It can make people think there's actually nothing to be done, no solutions out there. So I think it's absolutely vital that anyone involved in any kind of social change, I guess, works harder and together to link our practical action in the present to much more vivid, compelling, serious imagination about what could be different in the future. Because the greatest myth in any world, in any society, is the myth the way things are is the only way things can be. This is a matter of choice. We live in a world we create, and it's up to us to try and create it better. So I hope that's given a little bit of food for thought for your deliberations, and I hope perhaps in the future we can work on some of this stuff together. Thank you.